We're rolling. Got it. Got it. Happy Friday, everyone. Sorry we are delayed. That's why I don't like telling people when I'm going to be on because some stuff like this happens and I literally get like, I feel bad making people wait. So
Hi.
thank you for your patience, anyone that's here. Trina, we've got her. We figured out a way to get her.
Yay.
Devil didn't let it devil didn't take us down.
Oh,
And so Madyson and I talk a lot. We both like to talk, right?
she's like one
And
of my new
so
besties.
right, and so when we're talking, we try to hash out all of the world's things, right? Because we think we have all the answers, of course, and we don't. But we know who does because she has all the grace, all the wisdom,
Yes.
all the mercy, little Miss Terrina Picarello. So thank you for
Yes.
coming, and we thought you could share with us. So I was talking to Madison, and we were saying how like it seems like the whole survivor world is splintering and fracturing off, and it kind of breaks my heart.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things that you can get caught up in and not even like you get going and then you realize, oh, I didn't mean to go down that road. And then like the ego gets in the way, you don't want to admit it or whatever it is. And so while I was talking to Mass, I'm like, we should bring Trina on and maybe she can
Yes.
like help everybody get kind of a good perspective on this. And so I called Trina and we chatted for a while. And the first thing she said is she said, that happens in every business. And I was like, wow, that's so true. Because I remember with Michael Jaco, there was a lot of the different splintering. I'm not on his show anymore, or he's not on mine, or I don't like him, or it was so silly to me, because I feel like ultimately we have way more in common than we have different.
Yeah.
And so Madyson, you want to kick off with, just asking Trina something or sharing what inspired you to want to be a part of this today?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I love Trina. We did a show like a while back, and such a strong advocate. I say it all the time for therapists because I would be a total hot mess without mine. So I'm such a strong advocate for it. But like Carmen and I were chatting, and it's funny. I told Carmen I will never go and attack another survivor, even if they are attacking me. I was a recruiter, and I would tell people that I would place in jobs if they were in contracts. I'm like, listen, if your boss pisses you off or you get mad, instead of popping off at your boss, call me and yell at me and scream at me and lash out at me. So I kind of take that with survivors that are lashing out, that they're healing. They haven't gone through their healing. And don't get me wrong, it is a journey for any survivor. I mean, there's sometimes, even now, as healed as I think I am, there's something that can trigger me. And I'm like, wait, I got to step back and say, why is this triggering me? But a lot of survivors don't have those tools. So I guess it's like, I know Carmen and I, like, we don't want to just sit here and let's like talk about it. Let's give them some type of tool where it's like, how can they move forward, from a therapy aspect of it. And it's sad because they, in the world in general, they want all of us to be fighting and to hate on each other. And if we all came together, so much change can happen. But the hating and the just the jealousy of, oh, well, you have this and I don't have this. And it's like, it's kind of like kids really like fighting about
Yep.
ridiculous things. So I don't know if you want to comment on that, but
if we want to let the dark side win, so to speak, right? If the creepy crawlers, get us, then that's what happens is we create chaos within our own group, and then we can't fulfill our mission. And so it's like, gosh, it's too easy to fall for that, right? And so what I love about you and Carmen bringing this topic forward is that intention from both of you to not let that happen. And it sounds like your intuition, both of you, is that if we succumb to this, then we're not going to fulfill our mission and we're not going to get things done, right? And so that's what happens in, like I was telling Carmen on the phone, is this can happen in organizations too. So when I first became a therapist, I was a therapist like 3 months. And the owner of the practice, the founder of the practice, said, I want you to speak at our next national conference. So I never done that before. And it was a conference that was supposed to teach about sexual health. So to elevate, because there's so much damage done, sexual violence, and it's an organization that tries to help teach sexual health so that people can protect themselves from being victimized sexually. And it's also an organization that was trying to educate not only clinicians, but the general public about sex addiction being like a real thing. And so I never heard of that. So I was a little bit of a hater of that whole topic. And then I had to learn, I had to be a student. So there's a lot of education to share about so that we can all be safer and healthier. And I feel like that's the part of the intention of the survivor movement and all of us kind of trying to share and do these shows is we want to be helpful. We want to share education. We want to give people information. We want to give them that support in that inner resources so that they can protect themselves. Right. And so at the conference, what I realized as a brand new therapist going in, I'm being invited to speak. And what I noticed is that even in a professional situation like that, there's this pettiness and there's this like, I'm just walking around with my little speaker badge, and I'm just kind of getting the vibe. But what I started to pick up is that as a new speaker, people would approach me in what I would call like grooming and poaching. I didn't know, but I felt like I was being sort of like, like people were trying to grab my attention and grab my allegiance in a way. And there was a lot of backfighting of like, which ballroom are you speaking in? And how, what is it's supposed to like people that put on conferences, they can sort of bully you by where they put you in the program. And when there's competition within this group, so here's this group that wants to try to elevate sexual health and elevate our health around, sexually, being sexually vulnerable and training for therapists so that therapists can train people and also just community advocates so that like people in the community can go out and, speak at schools or speak, out in the community to try to help everyone be more informed and more protected. Right. And so within that, I noticed all this backfighting and stuff. So it's really like where this, Satan's agenda comes in and doesn't want us to be protected and doesn't want us to be, doesn't want us to have that good infrastructure. And so it's that thing about abundance or lack, right?
Yes.
So when we get into the pettiness, it's as if the lower self of all of us says, there's not enough limelight. There's not enough attention. There's only a finite amount of, space for somebody to be elevated, which isn't true, right? There's abundance in the universe. In God's universe, there's abundance. So there shouldn't be any competition for speaker time or what your story is and what your audience is. But what I am kind of picking up on in the survivor stuff, it feels the same. It feels like the exact same kind of thing that I noticed in a professional setting. And I was telling you, Carmen, that I saw the same thing when I was asked to speak at a pastor's conference. So there's these conferences that are annual conferences for pastors. And of course,
pastors do it too.
The worst.
The intention of the conference is let's have all these opportunities for people to teach pastors, support them in how they can then go back and support, their flock, right? And so we would go and speak about sexual health and, just sex education and also about addiction and trying to support the pastors when they have parishioners that come and need help. The pastors need help. They are so, stretched thin, and we're trying to give them good information and also educate about how much the church is suffering with addiction and sex addiction specifically and porn, and how it's a different challenge within the religious community to just say that you have a problem with that. And then pastors themselves aren't supposed to have any problems. So the founder of my practice is a doctorate in marriage and family therapy, but he's also a minister. And his dad was a minister. And so he has this unique bridge between, therapy and recovery and all.
Let me ask you real quick before you go on, because you said something, and I think it's like key. You were talking about the addiction, right? That pastors have and different people. Do you think that portrays as well with survivors, because they get addicted to the drama, they get addicted to the fighting, they get addicted to chaos? I know a therapist told me once when I was going through my divorce and I was really mad and I want to throw things at her, she said, "Where are you accountable?" And so survivors don't think that they have to be accountable for their actions, but they really do have to be accountable when you're not being trafficked. And you're not accountable for other people's actions, but there's like an addiction, like a weird type of addiction of the chaos and the drama. It's a different type of addiction.
And that is a great thing for all of us to be mindful of, because when we see it in ourselves or when we see it in someone else, that's how we know that they're stirring in their trauma. So that's actually a behavior that we can identify that says this person is now lost in their drama, the circle of trauma.
Okay, so this is good. So what would be an example of somebody who's stirring in their drama? What would be the way that would manifest out in the natural wild?
The easiest first would be like the bold print is non-relational behavior, right? So where what they're saying and doing harms the connection. Okay. And so if I'm attacking or blaming, or if I'm proselytizing, if I'm one up, I always think about this. If you're one up and looking down on people, that's offensive. It's offensive. That's not joining. You're not going to make somebody want to listen to you. You're not going to have someone feel open if you're talking down to them, right? So when you look for the energy or the languaging of, I know more, let me tell you. And when you have somebody that just has some heat on holding that position so that they want to, sort of be like the know-it-all or the savior. And in therapy we call it the hero rescuer position. So if you are the one that's going to come in on your white horse and save other people, so it would be like, look for behaviors where someone offers when you didn't ask.
Yep.
So over helping, over offering, over teaching, just overstepping, and it feels offensive. And sometimes that is a trauma response, because when you have been victimized, people truly have been victimized. So when you're in the victim posture, you feel powerless and helpless. And if you truly are powerless and helpless, it's actually a threat to your survival. Because if you don't have the power to get up and run away or fight or protect yourself, it would end it would end your survival. So it gets activated in that sort of caveman survival brain, why there's so much energy behind it. But because you know how you can tell people whatever topic you're talking about, you feel this energy of like it's life or death, right? So the victim posture is, if you've been victimized, then for your survival, you never want to be on the bottom ever again. So you've been here, you go, if it's the last thing I do for the rest of my life, I'll never be here. So what you do is you overcompensate and you go around and so we call that, it's called the drama triangle. Have either one of you heard of that?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So
I've been in therapy a long time. I've seen all of the triangles and circles.
So I have a little helper in my brain that says, watch out for triangles. Triangles are bad, so that I'm mindful to pay attention to these markers. So the triangle is somebody who's a bully. There's a spot is the perpetrator or the bully, the know-it-all, the offender. And so a lot of times somebody that's been victimized, because they can see how hurtful it is for a perpetrator to harm another person. They say, well, I never want to do that. I'll never be a bully. And so the only other option is to be a know-it-all hero rescuer, right? So we have the perpetrator, the victim, and the hero rescuer.
Isn't that like the same as the domestic violence as well? The triangle, when they're talking about if you get, because when I was going through my divorce, my ex was like, I said, teach me how I never be in a domestic violence situation again, so you're not a victim. So that's the triangle, correct? What I'm thinking, or am I wrong?
Yep. And sometimes you feel like if you're trying to not be victimized, that if you are in charge and you're the one that's directing everything,
yeah, telling people what to do.
Yeah.
That's what I've been getting lately. People telling me what to do, who to interview, who not to interview, who to talk to.
That's exactly that is the sort of the perpetrator or the controlling position. So when you're the bully, you're in control, right?
Right.
And so it's also, sometimes that one's a sneaky one because somebody doesn't look like they're being abusive or bullying, but they're being controlling. So somebody that's controlling and rigid and my way or the highway, or black and white thinking it's this way or nothing at all. And if this one person says this, then forget everything that person says. So that all or nothing, that is on the triangle. So that is
that's the hero rescuer, the one that's trying to control, or is that more the bully?
Well, what's funny about that is, to the person, it seems like they're being helpful and they're like, I'm just trying to help you by taking charge here and getting something going. And it can look like it's a positive thing and it's positively, well, I have good intentions, right? And they're right. And that one is a sneaky one because it's really bullying. And it's when you are controlling and you're coming in like a freight train, you're not open and it's not a dialogue anymore and it's not relational. Right. So and that is why it's a part of a trauma response. Because right. when you feel that energy and you can tell that the person just has to do this and they're not really even slowing down enough to be intuitive and they're not like seeing if the other person is even open or let the other person respond. So that's a typical for a therapist. We look for that hypervigilance and that trying to position yourself so that you're never on the bottom and taking up all the, just taking.
Let me ask you about that because so my therapist, because we've done all the triangles and everything, but she also talks to me about when that stuff happens, you have to know a balance to where I myself don't go into paranoia of like, this is I'm setting my boundaries, or am I being paranoid that this person is actually being helpful? And how do you just like decipher between those two? I know the answer she's told me, but because you're the professional, like because I think that that's important for survivors to know, because just like you said, they're like, let me attack. You might be a little bit whatever above, so I'm going to attack you so I can get here. And it's just like a vicious cycle. So if you can.
Yeah, the triangle is sneaky because when someone's trying to help you, you're not going to immediately have a red flag going because helping is nice, right? Someone's trying to help you, but sometimes help is not helpful. Sometimes help is kind of like it sends the message that you're not capable. Here, let me help you, you poor thing. Let me help. That isn't good for survivors because it fosters that subliminal message of you're not capable, you're not powerful. Let me help you. And that's why it's offensive. So I did that a lot when I was in graduate school learning this. And my professor just nailed me ruthlessly. She was like, it was so sneaky because sometimes I didn't think I was doing it, but I was still doing it. So it's sort of like an easy way to remember that is don't help unless you're asked. If a survivor is sharing and they're struggling, don't suggest what they need because how do we know what? And part of empowering them and part of helping them find their inner strength so that they aren't victimized again is having them be self-reliant, independent. And that is what heals you from trauma, is being capable and having the inner resources to find your own answers. And so we have to back off and let people struggle to find their legs. And that makes them safer overall, because when you're not dependent on another person, you're not as likely to be victimized and get stuck in for example, a domestic violence situation. When you know you can find your own answers, you can find your own resources, you can figure out how to feed yourself, you can struggle and find out another place to live, and so it's important that we let survivors, part of their recovery is letting them find their legs and letting them struggle through. And it's uncomfortable to watch someone struggle, right? But if you do someone's homework for them, they're not going to learn the concept. And how is that helpful? So it's a very sneaky, tricky thing that it's a codependent pattern.
Right.
And really unhealthy.
And so that reminds me, you were talking about when we were on the phone about rising water raises all boats. And you were talking about Madyson and, just how you experience her. And I thought it was really beautiful the way that you described her. I was like, that's so dead on.
Just kidding.
Yeah, roll around in the compliments right now.
Oh, if you know this or about yourself, or like other people have said it, but as I experience you, I see this deep strength from the inside of you. And I really love the part of you that can hold on for a really decent amount of time. You have such a long fuse, because I've seen in interviews where somebody is really, in my opinion, being offensive and also rude and pushy. And I think on the triangle, being that kind of offensive person, and they're still sort of I'm just trying to ask questions. I'm just trying to, help you get your story out. But they're being rude and offensive, and they're in that, they're in that offender vibe, right? And you just watch, you sit there inside yourself and you just hold on. And that is really powerful mindfulness, because to me, I'm watching you say, that isn't about me, that's about them. Yeah. I'm not going to participate. And I'll let them do that. Like, they're allowed to be unhealthy and not be.
It's so true. I mean, that's what I always say. I just like allowing everybody to stay in their own lane.
But that's how you stay off the triangle. Because when you observe someone, you give them the dignity of their process. And it's okay if somebody's wrong or not healthy. That's okay. We are sometimes. And you don't jump in and interrupt them. You don't try to fix them. You don't even want to tell them where they're wrong. That doesn't allow them to figure it out themselves. So, Madyson, you have that down. You also don't make it more confusing and chaotic by jumping in and reacting, because now you just have two unhealthy people going in a unhealthy circle. And so you're better than most, Madyson, at staying out of it, but also being very respectful and loving. And you're also really kind of strong. Your body language and your energy is you're not being passive. You're just strongly, calmly, assertively witnessing them. And you're not helping them. It's like, if you want to make it, ASS of yourself.
True. It's funny because
you're good about too, because the way you get off the triangle is you have boundaries, and boundaries are, correcting someone gently and politely, but you don't let some offensive thing go without course correcting. But you do a good job of being, when you do correct someone, you do it very, strong, assertive, but you're not, you don't come in with that energy that could keep the thing going. So you come in with this very strong, powerful energy that's off the triangle. And I don't know if you know that, but you're really good at that.
You know, it's funny that you say that because I know about the triangle. And then when I was seeing a therapist, they taught us the domestic violence. Well, I still see a therapist, but they taught us the domestic violence wheel as well. Like, where are you participating in this? Are like even with your kids and how you talk to them and different things. And one of the things that my therapist said to me, where I was like, really, I don't know, it just like clicked in my head of, I don't ever want this again. She said, you need to be so uncomfortable not being in chaos that you're comfortable not being in chaos. Because I was so comfortable with things chaotic. I was picking the wrong type of men and marrying them and settling for when I know I deserve better. And so when she started to make me look at myself of, okay, I can let go of everything else, but how do I let go of what I've gone through and forgive myself for making choices that have affected not only me, but my children?
Yeah.
How do I go there? And that's where I think, you know, I can see that domestic violence. I can see that. And I'm not talking about domestic violence of like they're hitting you. There is emotional domestic violence. I can also see the narcissistic side of people. And so, you know, to engage with them is just basically stooping to their level. And so, and I also no one taught me until my therapist now taught me, you're allowed to have those boundaries. You're allowed to say, I'm not going to engage. Now, if someone wants to have a conversation with me, I'll have a conversation. If you're going to come at me and attack me,
Right.
then I can step away and say, you know what? I don't have to engage in this. I don't give you permission. It's kind of like we did this show. We said, I do not consent. I don't consent to, you know, you disrupting my peace, because frankly, I know what God has put me on this earth for. And I also know that the attacks come at me even harder when I'm about to go on an extraction. And so if I do shows or anything like that, the attacks come, and I don't ever want to be in anybody's chaos ever again. And I feel like even this past year has been a learning lesson that Carmen and I talked about it with doing different shows and learning. It's kind of like, you know, was I being a show whore, you know, just going around and being on some people's shows that I probably should have never been on, kind of like what you said, where they're just kind of pushing and pushing and pushing the boundary and making it look as if, you know, okay, is she crazy? Is she not crazy? Is she telling the truth? And so now it's like, you know what? No, I don't give them permission. They don't get to disrupt my peace. And I'll be around the people like this, like healthy conversations with healthy people and loving people. And that gives solutions too. I mean, who cares what we have to say? Let's start giving solutions of, hey, like you need help or you're going through something. Like, it's kind of like what you guys said. What is your need? What does a survivor's need? And let's see how we can figure out how to help them, as opposed to just sitting there and fighting, you know. And again, I will never go and attack a survivor. I don't care who they are, you know.
Yeah. And I'd like to add something too, because I think you can extrapolate this all the way down across the board: families, businesses, churches, any type of relationship. In my personal opinion, there's my business, their business, God's business. And I every time look at, no, this isn't my business. And how I learned this the hard way was I used to play the intermediary in my marriage between my husband and the children. He would say, tell Dane to do this, or tell Carly to do this, and I would do it. And one of the things that was the most freeing about getting divorced was for the kids to have their own interaction with their dad, not having me interpret it like telephone and then telling them. Basically, when you take over and you get into somebody else's lane, you steal from them the ability to have a relationship, to have an honest relationship, to confront things. And this is how we all learn. You know, I mean, honestly, it's one of the biggest things that I talk to people about is, you know, someone will call and be like, how do I say this to this person to where it sounds nice? And, you know, because they don't know how to do it, and they've never learned.
Right.
Yeah. And that's the thing about when you feel like you're being helpful, I'm just trying to help. Sometimes that's offensive. And my professor used the word offensive. And I was like, oh, offensive? I'm not. And she called me an offender. And I was like, an offender? Like, you know, because I have like a sex offender. And she's like, you're being offensive when you overhelp, because you're weakening the other person, and that's abusive. And you're putting them in danger to keep them weak. So back off. And she had me do a 3-month moratorium where I had to create very specific things to make sure that I was not staying in that energy, because that's part of my trauma from my childhood, right? People pleasing, over helping. It's not coming from a good place. It's coming from trauma, right? And so you're a wounded person. How helpful is your help going to be when it's coming from your wounding? When you're helping so that you avoid your own insides, when you want to avoid your own situation, so you get involved in somebody else's, that's a trauma response. And so what you were talking about, Madyson, is what we would call a baseline for normal when you get addicted to chaos. So that's what I think all be mindful in the survivor community. When people start going at each other, sometimes it's because from a neurological standpoint, when you've been a survivor, you have been in danger. So you've been in fight, flight, freeze. So you've been in a physiological state of adrenaline and cortisol. And sometimes your adrenaline and cortisol never shut off because you aren't safe for like years. So a lot of survivors for years, they're in danger even when they're sleeping. When they're resting, they're not safe. They could still be bothered or, exploited or, attacked in their sleep. And so you get out of that situation, but you have to update the biology and you have to heal the body so that the body stops staying in that cycle. And when that's missed, if somebody doesn't even, lots of survivors never make it to a therapist's office and don't have the opportunity to have, professional help. And they're just sort of like self-healing, which is fine. But this is often a piece that's missed with a therapist. Some therapists miss this. And people that, are doing on their own, they wouldn't know. But you have to reset the biological baseline for normal, because otherwise you're not going to know that you're just so used to that numbed out adrenaline, cortisol. And then when everything gets good and calm and safe, like you just said, Madyson, it's uncomfortable, but your brain says, but why? Why am I feeling like I just need to go stir something up, right? And so these survivors fighting with each other, now we can, as an outside observer, have compassion and awareness for witnessing that might be part of, it's like sort of like an addiction to numbing out, because it's a stage of recovery, and they're kind of stuck in that gap between being in danger and being safe and healed. There's a space in the middle, and the space in the middle requires a lot of manual labor, right? And so when you're in that gap, you need help. And so we don't want to pick at somebody and start attacking them when they're in this gap. In the gap is somebody that's already over here. You can model, and Madyson, you do this so well when you just kind of sit and observe and don't engage. I don't know if you're aware of this, but what you're doing for them biologically is you're letting them borrow your stillness and your inner peace, which you learned how to do. But, you put a lot of hard work into it, and someone taught you, helped you get there. But all you have to do is sit in this space, and it in a way, it's like by osmosis, and you can help the other person's nervous system entrain and copy. You can let them borrow, like, you're sort of safe in their place in line, and it makes it easier for them to find it. Just like if you're trying to learn something and someone like says, here, let me do it. And then you can see how I'm doing it, and then you can copy me. And so what you were doing, Madyson, what I was observing is you were biologically modeling this healthy, grounded, healed space, and you were being invited. I think of it as an invitation, like, triggering or doing some of the behaviors. I just see it as like it's an invitation, and then I can either join or not. And I know better, and I pay attention, because it doesn't help them. It's not kind or loving to that person when you jump in, because now going backwards, you're not modeling anything better or more healed. And so it's not cool to do that, especially when you do know how to, hold that healing space. We need to. And so that's something that I see, Carmen, with you and Madyson, is you guys both just are really good at that. You're really good at holding that loving, unconditional, positive regard. And that right there is a very powerful position, and it heals by osmosis. It's really powerful.
Yeah, that's so cool. Well, one of the things too that we had talked about, Terrina, was that in your experience, and this shocked me, in your personal experience, correct me if I'm wrong, 50% of the time there's genuine survivors out there trying to heal themselves, trying to tell a good story, trying to tell the truth. But then there's also this other 50% that is really there either to infiltrate, to get money, to handle people that are involved. So can you share? I was shocked at that number. I would have guessed it was
That's
more
a
like
big number.
80% were, really genuine and honest, and the other 20% were, maybe reaching out of their own traumas.
And that comes from being, around recovery and all the research we have about trauma. There's a decent amount of people who've been victimized themselves who just repeat it. They go and victimize other people because that's what was done to them. And it keeps them safe. And they will seek out survivors. They will seek out people. And they have an agenda to keep from, kind of admitting that they were ever a victim. Does that make sense? So yes. I don't want to remember that I was ever on the bottom and I was ever vulnerable and somebody ever did that to me. So I'm going to just go out and I'm going to just create a hobby and a compulsion. It becomes a compulsion. And it's a way that they self-medicate their hidden pain and their trauma and keep it from surfacing at all. They keep it buried, and they have to go out and victimize other people. But if you're going to get away with it, especially survivors, you can't overtly be abusive, because now a survivor is going to look out for that. A survivor is consciously watching out for people that are exploitive or abusive. So those people have to get pretty sleuthy and ninja to get their feed, right? So it's like their heroin hit that numbs them out. So they will use what they know about trauma, victimization, and what they do is they come in looking like, I want to be helpful, I want to be supportive, I'm here for you. And they use that languaging of the hero rescuer, right? But it's sort of like a wolf in sheep's clothing. Yeah. And it's so easy for them to do. And it's so awful. It's so awful. But everyone needs to know ahead of time, when you start stepping into healing and recovery, you have to look out for the wolves in sheep's clothing, because they just gravitate towards anybody that's starting to heal. And you're really vulnerable when you're starting to heal. And it does feel that somebody's listening to you and not shutting you down and saying that didn't happen. And so if you go in knowing it's 50-50, you're a little safer.
Yeah, so that is true. Because you'd be going, okay, this is a coin toss here.
Well, and the thing is too, like if you're in your healing journey, and then it's like people come around and then they're pushing you into that chaos, back into that chaos. I had a girl that I worked with when I was a recruiter, and I was just starting to learn how to work a normal job, and she was chaos everywhere she went. And so she like attached herself like a leech. And I just thought, oh, she's just being a friend and whatever. And then I had to learn, this is not a friendship. She's wanting me to push me into the chaos, because she was so chaotic behind here. She could push me out in the front and be like, oh, but she's more chaotic, even though it was her. Like, you know what I mean? So you have to be able to navigate that.
Here's a really, really good question for Terrina out of the chat. Thank you, JT. Can you explain why so many people viciously attack survivors for not having receipts, to prove their abuse?
Love that question.
That is the most common, like it's as old as time. And that's why victims don't tell anybody. That's why children don't tell when they're abused, because the most common reaction is that you're attacked. And the outsiders say, what is your proof? What, how do I know that what you're telling me is true? And just think about how we do that to children, right? And we just immediately discredit a child. We immediately discredit anyone, especially people who are victims of sexual crimes. And when we do a deep dive and a forensic investigation of where that energy comes from, a lot of that, and the person doing it may not know. It may be conscious, it may be unconscious, and it might be a little of both. But usually they have some hidden, like unintegrated, not integrated.
Wow.
They have a part of the story. They've either been a perpetrator or a victim, and they have not made peace with that. They haven't been able to sit with it because it's too scary and crazy. And so it's a disintegrated part of their own trauma, and it's their protection to go after. Again, it's just a distraction so that I don't have to feel my pain. I'm just going to change the subject and go after this person, because if it's projection, okay? So projection is my worst fear that I can't face. I'm going to project it onto this other person. And it has a purpose, because it's one more opportunity for somebody to see their stuff. But it's really difficult to be their projector, right? When they're projecting, it's like, whoa, right? And so, but it's just another way that people try to get healed, but it can hurt other people. So you have to watch out for it on both sides, that you're not doing that unconsciously. And you're also, when someone does it, how do you shut it down to protect yourself and them? Because it's usually coming from shame. Because sometimes when we are victimized, the easiest way to keep that hidden so that the perpetrator gets away with it, right? Because if we don't tell, we can't stop it. And there's this shame, we call it a shame barnacle, right? Like you got to go after trying to unhook all those shame barnacles, because shame is a very powerful way that all this continues to happen in the shadows, because secrets keep the system going. Yeah. And so shame is what the bully or the perpetrator gives to the victims. So it says, there's something wrong with you that this happened to you. And it's internalized shame is why people are afraid to tell. And so they say, well, that's not what happened. That must not be what it was. So whatever they're attacking is something that they have not made peace with. And they could be on either side of it, right?
Yeah. Let me ask you a question on that, because I get a lot is no survivor can talk the way she does and not be a hot mess and cry and everything else. There's no way that she can be a survivor. So what do you say to those people? Because it's like, okay, I've gone through a great deal of not only therapy, trauma therapy, as well as spiritual deliverance. Like, what would you say to those people? Because it is, you go through so much work, and then is that part of their shame as well? And that's why they're saying that?
It's a part of all of the misunderstandings and the mythos that keeps this perpetuated. There's so many myths about what makes abuse happen. So part of feeding into shame to keep this whole bad system going, shame is so toxic. It's poison, right? And so shame is that if anybody's ever a victim, then it's so horrific is that they're never going to be okay again. And they're going to just be a mess all the time. And every time you talk about it, you would just obviously be distraught. And that isn't what we do. You can be that way, but moreover, the survival instinct kicks in, and we all have this mechanism auto-programmed into it. Like every baby already has this. It's our survival instinct. It just kicks in, and it's auto-programmed. It's original factory equipment from God so that we can survive. So when something awful happens, you have to be able to pull yourself together and you split off. So your personality splits, and there's a part of you that goes on with normal life, because children all the time are abused at home or abused at church, and they go home and get up and go to school the next day. And you get evidence that they have been sexually assaulted the day before. So that's why people say, well, that must not be true, because you said that happened on Wednesday, and Thursday you were at school and everybody
happy,
and you were a normal kid. So
so true.
And that is not how trauma works. So when you study trauma from a medical model or a physiological trauma, that isn't what actually happens. So when something especially is too much for you to handle, and or you don't feel like you're going to get support if you tell, you have to shut down all evidence of that harm, because it doesn't feel safe. So the truth is, most of the time, we don't help someone properly. We don't protect them. We don't handle it well. And so they're not wrong in their protective instincts. See, our instincts are like these animal instincts, and they're usually right. They're usually correct. And again, they keep us alive. So the reason we do that is so that we can wait until it is safe. And sometimes a person might not be safe for years. And that's why people sometimes don't talk about childhood sexual abuse until 30 years later. Because they're not around a safe environment where they wouldn't be attacked. Okay. So it's very common for people to be attacked when they report a crime, because everybody freaks out, right? Because we don't want to believe that we all live in a world where children and people that are in vulnerable situation are victimized. We like fantasy that could never happen, right? So what that is the fight, flight, freeze, and it's really strong and it's automatic. You didn't do that on purpose. So if you know the science of the fight, flight, freeze, that explains it. But a lot of times, this is where the craziness starts when someone tries to tell their story. Because when you don't know the biology of this, then you think manipulating, right? Because if you're so calm and cool, you couldn't have had this happen. So therefore, you're manipulating and lying, right?
Yeah, that's good, because I could see where they'd make that disconnect. I love, there was one time that somebody was getting on me for having some healthy like laughter with Cheryl Beck on the show. And Cheryl got on there and she says, am I not allowed, because I had this thing happen to me way back here, am I not allowed to laugh now? I've got to always have victim status on so that you feel more comfortable. And I just love that. And the other thing she said too is she says she's familiar with somebody, she shared it in our last show, and they had a collector program. And the collector program is somebody that literally takes pieces from everyone's story and then starts making it as if it's part of their story. Oftentimes you can catch them though, because they literally have the same story as everyone rather than their own unique story. But the other thing I would love to hear your comment on this, because Maria Farmer's in the chat. And she said, but I can also explain, as a Epstein survivor, there are many fake Epstein survivors. They are lying and they are grifting from our suffering. Proof sometimes is necessary, or she said, proof is necessary. So I would love to hear what you have to say about that.
But there's a healthy balance, so that what we want to do is have that mindful presence. And also what I love is how you guys talk about having support so that we can support each other, because this is kind of complicated at times. Yeah. But that's a wonderful point, and that does happen. And the reason that happens is the bad guys don't want to lose their ability to continue to offend. They don't want to lose their gig. So what they do is they have these little minions who don't realize why they're helping the bad guy, right? And they're a part that is so that they can continue to deny their own wounding, right? So it's a distraction to keep them from realizing that they're being victimized or have been victimized. So let me just distract and let me feel like it's what we call the bully, the bystander, and the victim. The bystander is a person that says, this is so terrifying that there's somebody victimizing somebody vulnerable. Now, what is my best position? So if I can't overpower the bully, should I ally with the victim and support the victim and befriend the victim, or should I befriend the bully? And in a threat for your survival, you may have a better chance of surviving if you befriend the bully. Okay, so this is just survival brain 101, and it is like, oh my gosh, if this happens in the world, I might as well be on the team with the bad guys. Right? The bad guys need me to protect them, and they need me to attack the victims so that they don't go to jail and they don't have to stop what they're doing. So if I befriend and do a good job for the bad guy, they're not going to offend me. They're not going to attack me, and I'll be safe. So that happens a lot. And the thing about what you do is what Madyson was kind of talking about is this is where you need boundaries so that everybody stays safe. You have to do that in a way that's healthy, balanced, and you want to do it in consultation with others so that you're supported. And you have to be mindful, which is, again, why you want to talk to someone who has some experience and who's done it. You have to be mindful of what you share, because there are people who want to keep the offense cycle going, and they want to come at you in every way. So you have to be very careful when you start to share. You do have to get your ducks in a row, because we do need to tell on the bad guys. If we don't tell on them and do it in the right way, we don't stop it. So that's why she's right. You have to tell, but you also don't want to get in that unhealthy, you come from a position of healthy, balanced state where it's strong and assertive, but you have to over right mind to do that. If you're just reactive because somebody goes, well, prove it, and you're kind of in that.
Or I'm one too, but they really aren't. Or they met him and they were around him, but not, in the way that somebody else was kidnapped and, whatever.
Well, if I can say that, because Maria Palmer is watching, and I just have to say this because it's important. First of all, I believe you. And I'm going to say that a million times anytime you come up on a show. And second of all, it is okay to block the people that are harassing you. I used to think, oh no, like they're going to think that I'm lying or whatever. But if it is disrupting your inner peace and your mental health, I see how you're being attacked, block them. And don't give them that power over you, because just like Terrina says, that bully stance they're standing over you right now, and they're trying to have that power, and just block them, because they want to disrupt our peace. They want us in that chaotic feeling, in that fear feeling. And so just give yourself permission to set those boundaries, because, people that are attacking you, truth always comes out in the end, always, always. And so just give yourself permission to just to walk away so you can go through your healing journey. And, you ever need a friend, get my information from Carmen. I wanted to say that to her.
Me too. I'm in that group too. And you can reach out to me anytime. And I want everyone to know that it is important that you block people and stop them, because it's not safe for them either. If you think about this, okay, somebody who is doing that to a surviving victim that's starting to talk about their story, that person is not okay. There's something seriously, deeply wrong there in that story. There's something bad that's happened to that person, or they wouldn't come after someone who's been victimized. It's not a healthy, normal behavior. So that person is not well. And if we don't create a safety barrier for that person, then they never become safe either. So they don't know how to get out of their black hole. And when you have some sense of structure and you're starting, even if you're just a beginner, you might know more and have a little bit more to offer than they do. And so you see that as something that it's the loving, right thing to do, even for the offender, to stop the cycle. Yeah. So when you've been victimized, you are supposed to stop someone from victimizing you further. That's a part of your healing. That keeps you safe. It's important for your own journey that you stop those as soon as you see it. You know, sometimes it takes a little bit to go, what is that? And then you're, so it's just, as soon as you notice it, you stop and you exit. You take the exit, right? You just get off of the phone. You get out of that energy. You stop giving them access to you. And then you give that person a loving opportunity to see what's going on with them. Because then they have to go, I was blocked. Like, she's not getting my messages. And then it's an opportunity for them to start their healing journey. And you do right by all of us when you try to give healing a chance. And so it's a little counterintuitive to help a bully, but somebody that's a bully has been victimized. That's what causes bullying.
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely.
We have to say no to that. We have to help a victim. But if it's a satanic, it's part of Satan's minions and it's coming from Satan, we have to stand up to Satan. Yes. We have to say, no, you will not do that to any of us. And it starts right in those moments of don't defend yourself, because being defensive is part of the trauma triangle. Don't defend yourself. Don't explain. Don't defend. Don't explain. And that's one of the things I want people to target on. If you're having a conversation with someone and you find that they're trying to put you in the position to defend or explain, that is all you need to know to exit. You exit. Yes. It doesn't matter what their intention is. So one thing that I want everyone to know too, it doesn't matter if they're good intended. Okay. That does not matter. These behaviors, when you see them, whether they're conscious or unconscious, whether they're intentional or not, you stop and get out. That's the right thing to do. And that's the thing that protects you and others is I will not participate. I do not comply to unhealthy behaviors, and I'm out as soon as I see it. And you don't have to make a big deal about it and make the person feel bad. You just get out and you let them figure it out. And that's where God comes in, because you don't have to be the teacher. You let them be curious about why all of a sudden they don't have contact with you anymore.
Right. Yeah. Well, and what I'll do is there's sometimes I just have enough, somebody on my outer circle, they've tagged me too many times. They've, pressed in too many times, and I'll just block them for a couple days, and then I'll unblock them, and it checks them. They don't bother me again.
Also on both sides is you want to point that out to someone so they have the opportunity to see that they're out of balance.
Not if they're outer circle for me. I mean, if inner circle, yes, I will say something to them. Well, outer circle, I have too many of them.
But even if you just excuse yourself from them being able to contact you and you stay out of their energy, that's still helpful. So you do it on, right? So that's a behavior that you look for. If somebody's obsessed with you, if somebody compulsively contacts you outside of what's kind of the normal average experience, that's a red flag. Yeah. That means this is either a bad player or a traumatized person that's functioning from their trauma. Either one of those you don't participate in. Yeah, so some over hyper vigilant and compulsive and obsessive, that is a red flag. That's dangerous. Don't participate.
Well, that they're compulsive of trying to, you block them and you're like, I'm good. And then they're like, let me try to get at you some other way through other people. That's compulsive. I also realized too, when you are in that healing, state of peace, and stillness and calm that other people, my friend said it best. She's like, it's that grabby energy where they just want to grab and like steal it from you. And it's like, okay, but it's like that negative. They want you in that negative. And so they'll do whatever to keep you there of like, let me grab this and I want this from you and I want that. And I noticed that a lot. Carmen and I were talking about it where people will say, oh, I want this from you. Oh, I want this from you. Oh, can we do this? Can we do that? And it's like, wait a minute. What about, hey, how are you? How's your day? How's your life? You know?
So this is the thing I want you guys to, all of us to think about. What's the list of behaviors that mean we exit right there? We don't need to know any more details. We see that and we leave. We ourselves. So right there is somebody who's a taker, right? An energy vampire, or just a life vampire. Like, I want to just suck out and borrow everything that you have to give. So that's like a black hole person, right? And that is a definite red flag, because you feel it when somebody's clingy. And if someone, see, because that's exploiting, that's being I give to get. So I'm going to give you, I'm going to be polite and have a conversation with you, but that's not genuine. I really want something from you. That's exploitive. So that is that you want to watch out for and just target it so that you can start, like, you kind of pick 2 or 3 of these and you just focus on them for like a couple of weeks, and you go, okay, I'm going to just be mindful of all the conversations I have. Do I have a friend or a colleague or someone in my life that's constantly on the take? And I'm going to purposely pay attention to that. And if so, then I'm going to push them out to my outer circle. I'm going to put some space between us, because it's not participate with that.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny too, because so I have done so much work, and I'm very proud of the work that I've done, because it's hard work. It's a journey. And I always talk about how it reminds me of No Man's Land in Wonder Woman, where she's, crossing that thing and just everyone's shooting at her in every direction. I like literally never cry. And that made me cry because I'd been there and I had survived it. But I have now, so when you're codependent, you don't ever want to be alone. You don't want it quiet. You want the radio on, you want the TV on, you cannot have peace. So what you do when you come out of that is that radical self-care. And then as you do that radical self-care, you start doing things quiet, and you start having peace, and you're reading the Bible, and you're staying in the Word, and you're, reading self-help books. You're just building into that solitude, that beauty, that sovereignty. Well, then what happens is, that feeling of uncomfortable you get when you're not getting the dopamine hit. I now get that when I don't have peace. So I'm probably more likely to block somebody unnecessarily. I've gone the other way than I am, because it has become, I want to bring boring back. Like I love peace. Love it. So but anyway, go ahead.
My professor said, if you want to know what an issue is, right? Like, how do you know there's an issue? Is anything that disturbs your peace.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
So if somebody's behavior or some pattern disturbs your peace, you do not need to know anything else. That means pay attention to this, do something about that. Just like Maria is saying, do something about that.
Yeah.
That need to take an action and do something. And that usually is boundaries, but there's action needed.
I also think your mind, like someone had talked to me about this, a friend of mine a year ago, you got to change your thinking. As survivors, when we were victims, we were told we weren't worthy, we were horrible, all these names. And so you have to retrain your brain into that positive thinking. Like I have like everyday things on my mirror, like, okay, I am worthy, I am loved, I am, and you say those affirmations over and over again. And so that's when the disruption of your peace, and you don't settle for anything less. But survivors don't know that they have that permission, because they all the other chaos of like the ones that are harming. It's kind of like that other 50% that are like, let me go tackle the good 50%. And it's like this war. I mean, it is really a spiritual battle of good and evil. And so it's a mind thing as well. It's like your mind and your heart. Like, what are you worth? I mean, you're a daughter of a king. Like, that's your son of a king. Like, you are worthy. And we have to remember that. And unfortunately, you know, if you had abuse when you were a kid, you didn't hear that. And so I think that's important for survivors to know, is to just really have to retrain how you think and what is going in and out. It's like that song, be careful little eyes, what you see, be careful little ears, what you hear, you know, that song when you were a kid. I always think of that when it comes to.
And
just like religion too, Trina, I have a question for this one, because I think too, sometimes there's people that are pushing survivors to speak on shows for their own benefit, not for their benefit. And then I've also seen, because they're at different levels of healing, just like different levels of faith, then there's a little bit of infighting because, do you see what I'm saying?
Yep. So it's very important that you check inside and start to make those discerning decisions on, should you participate in any kind of exchange like that? Am I in a good place right now to be doing something like that? Is the person that I'm going to be interviewed by, are they healthy enough to have it be a healthy exchange and not be demonstrating unhealthy behaviors that others then copy? Like, which thing are we adding to? Are we adding to the dysfunction by continuing the dysfunctional pattern?
Yes.
And
right.
Or are we doing the opposite and having a healthy, boundaried conversation? And you have to know a little bit about who the person is, what the show is, and you want to like investigate and watch some of their shows to get a sense of the vibe. And you know, sometimes you have to run some experiments to kind of learn, like, you know, how to get it right. But it is important that you not be exploited, right? And there's times when it's just not good for you to be energy out, because when you're healing, you only have so much bandwidth, and you have to do a lot of self-nurturing and self-care. And sometimes when you overhelp just because someone asked you, that's where you get yourself, you know, watered down, where you can't then have good boundaries, because you've spread yourself so thin by being a people pleaser and saying yes, 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 yes. That is where you get in trouble, because now you're not having enough self-care and rest. And that's where you're going to get victimized again, because you're just run down and tired, and you don't have the energy to have good boundaries. So that is a thing we all have to help each other with, so that we know. And sometimes you can just tell that you start to slide off into unhealthy behaviors, and that's kind of how you go, where did I get out of the lane, and what was it, and when was it? And sometimes it's just hard to see, and it's just a practice. You have to just keep the practice, and you just get better and quicker, and it's shorter, and you know, you go out less often, and you don't go so far out before you notice. And it's a practice. You have to have this practice. But that's why I encourage everybody to have a target list, like write out, what behaviors am I supposed to look for, and what behaviors do I exit for? What am I?
And remember, half of them are bad intentions. That's a high number, and that's a big help to know that. Thank you.
And you need to have a practice of staying away from bad players. Part of recovery is you have to start editing out of that environment. You have to start, seen and unseen, conscious, unconscious. You have to realize unconscious brain way back here, which is the most powerful magnet to people, places, and things. There's like a magnetic attraction back here. And if you don't direct what this attracts, you're just going to stay in the same experience over and over again. So you have to, for a while, pay attention. But unless you have a target list, you can't really even pull this off. You have to say, what am I saying no to? What do I say yes to? What am I looking for when I know I'm kind of okay and when I'm out? And a lot of that is your peace. You know, if you can't stay grounded, if you can't, you have to say no. A lot of victims don't have a no muscle. And all of that is programming. So the other thing, Madyson, you were talking about, that is how you do recovery, is you have to reprogram all those negative messages. And some of the best ways for reprogramming is putting a sticky note on your bathroom mirror. You put the opposite message on, you have to look at it, and you have to have a lot of frequency. Yes. So you look at it and you see it visually, and then you say it out loud so that you add the voice, but you also hear it. And it reprograms your autopilot. I am worthy. I am worth saving. I am made from God. I am here with I am important. I matter. And that is an anti-shame program. So that dissipates shame, because shame is, I am the bad thing that happened to me. So I am now bad or damaged. Like, that's not true. Right. So anti-shame is, that happened to me. That's just an experience that I had. That doesn't now change who I am.
Define me, right. And so just so you guys know, I have a 1:30 client. So we've got 10 minutes left, and I would love for both of you to have like a last word, and then tell people where they can find you. Because Terrina, everybody's like, does she have social media? I don't think you do, right? You're not on social media? Okay, so, but you do have your website, and I'll make sure to put that up.
Mm-hmm.
So last words, like what, one big piece of advice to the whole community, whatever you would say.
You go ahead, Terrina. I'll let you go first.
Well, what I would say is, if there's anything that we've covered today that resonates with anybody and they want more specific information, is to let Carmen know, or contact me on my website. There's a contact button on my website, and I'd be happy to come back on and just be more specific and give a little more structure, and maybe give you some references for things that you want to learn more about that we talked about here. We could do another show around the Karpman triangle. It's called the Karpman triangle. If anybody wants to look that up, it's KARPMAN triangle. And it's also called the drama triangle. There's lots of information online about that. But we could also talk again about boundaries and how to do that. But I want to just say to Carmen and Madyson that I have been gifted watching you. I have been blessed, and it reinforces the healthy parts of me to be exposed to the two of you. And, that you both really matter to me, and you have had a positive impact on me, but also give me hope in the world that if two people like you guys are here, then maybe this isn't such a bad place for my kids to be, because it's inspiring.
No kidding, right?
Guys, because you're real, and I know you're real, and it gives me hope that there's still good things for us here to fight for.
Yeah. And it's just disgusting too, because I've probably blocked 7 people, all of them making foul porn comments, which I just think, what is that? Like, we have to come back and talk about, because it's beyond, I'm so mad at you that I'm going to now pull out the worst part of your whole life, and I'm going to shove it in your face in front of everyone. Luckily, none of us care.
What's so funny though, because you can shove that in my face. It doesn't bother me. I talk about it. You can say whatever you want. If that is the worst thing that you can say about me, I'm obviously doing something right in my life, because that was 20 years ago. And so you're taking a piece of my life that was 20 years ago. So I'm obviously doing something right. So when they do that, it's just more of a compliment than it is an insult, because you don't have anything else to say about me negative other than that I did porn. So, okay, get something
But that's
else.
a lot of people to be able to go that debased. I mean, that is low. But
what they're doing is exposing themselves, because Those comments came from inside of them. It came from their psyche and their heart. So it says what they have inside of them is hateful, dark, and destructive. That's all we learned. We learned that whoever sends those messages, they inside have dark, destructive intent. So good to know. That has nothing to do, guys.
Yeah. Well, and that was what I wanted to say to close out, and then I'll let Madyson go last. But what I was wanting to say is, to me, it's become really easy to figure out who the good ones are, because they truly don't have horrific fruit. They're not out there like I had a guy calling me a bitch the other day. And, I don't go around doing that. I don't call people names if somebody's attacking me. Like that, some guy told me I was ignorant the other day, and I was like, it's probably true. I do have ignorant moments, I just diffuse it. And also this made me think it might be more than 50% of the people involved might, what are the chances? Those people planned to be here because they knew we were going to be doing this.
But they want to interrupt healing. So have you ever heard of crabs in the bucket?
Yeah.
That's crab in a bucket is if they're miserable, unhappy, and unwell, they don't want anybody crawling out of the bucket. So as soon as you
How dare you, Madyson?
Crawl out, they pull you back in, and so you can't fall for it. You don't help anyone, including them, when you fall for that. You don't lower yourself to that frequency. You witness it and you say, God bless you with that, but that has nothing to do with me.
Yeah. And then how about you, Madyson? Any last words, and where can people find you, or do you want them to find you?
You know what, let me comment on that real quick. Is I just kind of feel like it's sad because there are so many hurting people, and it's just they're projecting, and you just have to love them through it. Really, thankfully I am healed enough that I can love them through it. And kind of like Terrina said, God bless them. And I love both of you. I said it in the beginning, I'm going to say it now. I'm such a strong advocate for therapy, and people are like, oh no, therapist and whatever. I think that therapists really teach survivors how to live in a world where they have triggers, and to teach us those triggers. I don't, and frankly, I know it's hard to find a good therapist, but try. I know that a lot of therapists have reached out to me and said, I'll donate my time, to survivors. And that's a red flag. The survivors donating their time, the therapist. You go ahead, because I'll give you the last 3 minutes, because I'm really curious about that. So go ahead. Go ahead.
That's on the list. If somebody offers help unsolicited, red flag.
She's the therapist. So yes. Well, that's where the thing is I searched out my therapist. I searched out my healing. So I get that, because you have to take accountability and search it out for yourself. But I just adore you guys. I can't wait to have more of these conversations, because I think it's healthy to have, and it's healthy to show people like you may be going through this, but there are ways to get through it. And I do really believe a lot of these triangles and the different things should be talked about, because as survivors, you get yourself into different situations because you're not healed. And so we have to start talking about how do you get to that healing process, and how do you start looking into the mirror of, okay, I'm accountable for this, I'm not accountable for this, and just kind of moving forward. So
why am I attacking people?
Who's attacking people?
No, I'm just saying, that's what people should be asking themselves, why in my free time, if I had free time, the last thing I'm going to do is get on here and troll people. That's crazy.
The last thing I would say is if you spot it, you got it.
Yeah.
So projection is usually what's happening. So if someone calls you a liar, they are having a problem judging themselves as a liar, because now that's on their radar screen. But anything that you present out or even complain about is about your deep wounding. It's coming from you. That's why you focus on it, because you have that issue. So it works in a way too. If you see something positive that someone has, you probably have that quality. That's why you see it in the other person. But when you attack someone for something negative about them, you have that inside you.
Yeah.
Got it.
Well, and it's kind of funny when you think about it, because I got to a stage in my healing that I was like, Wow, I'm really revealing myself to myself
Yeah.
and everyone else who's been to any kind of classes where they've realized this, because whatever it is that you're focused on, that's what's in your field, period. But thank you so much, ladies. And I definitely want to have both
Yes.
of you back. And Terrina, I've loved you since I was in my 20s. And Madyson, you're my new buddy.
love
And
it.
I'm so thankful for both of you. And we'll do it again, guys. I have to run. So sorry.
Okay,
Bye,
bye.
everyone. Thanks for being